Hello everyone. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different today. I'm going to be asking my viewers a question. To understand the question, let's rewind to the Skyrim days. During the Skyrim days, I did a speedrun slash challenge. The challenge was to see how fast somebody could beat Legendary difficulty doing all quests. The rules of the challenge were if modding was present, that you could not add anything that would break vanilla combat. So this means that you couldn't add, weapons or armor that had stats far above the vanilla. This includes standalone mods and even up to godly weapons and armor. You could, however, mod the graphics. If you wanted to make it look prettier, that was all good. So let's get started with Fallout 4 as kind of example to ask this question. To start it off, here is a mod to increase the amount of damage the 50 receiver does. Now, I do agree with this author that the 50 receiver doesn't really do a lot of damage for what it is. I mean, the 50 round in real life is very powerful. However, there's a problem with determining this. This is because Fallout 4 did a pretty terrible job of labeling. What I'm referring to is that 50 on there. It's not saying if it's 50 BMG or if it's 50 AE. There's a very big difference between the two. 50 BMG is Browning machine gun. 50 AE is Action Express. 50 AE is what you will find in Desert Eagles, and the 50 BMG is what you'll find in the M82 sniper rifle. To give you an idea of just how big of a difference, I have pulled up some images to help you. So over here, this is a 50 Action Express on the far left. Over on the right hand side is the 9mm Parabellum. So this is basically similar in measurement to what you'll find in the pipe rifle. This one on the almost far right, second from the right. That right there is the size difference between the two. So a 50 Action Express should do a lot of damage. Now, that's just a 50 AE. Here's a 50 BMG, all the way on the right. That's a big old round. On the far left, right here is the 762 by 51. The 762 by 51 is basically a 308 round. So this is what you'll find in your standard sniper and hunting rifles. So essentially, you're modding a sniper rifle or hunting rifle to either field this very large round on the right or this round on the far left. And that right there is something that I would have to know in order to determine like if that damage is good. Now, for people who aren't interested in gun tech, I guess you can just say, is this damage more than it should be? I'll post some stats in the description to help you determine this. Moving on to the Glock 20 pistol standalone mod. Now, I will agree that in Fallout 4, pistols are the most underpowered weapon in the game. They literally just cannot cut it late game. So I think Fallout 4 failed the Gunslinger perk or whatever it's called, the one that deals with pistols. However, this right here, this 10mm pistol, already does more damage than a modified 10mm pistol. And this isn't even modified from what I can tell. Now, I don't know if you can modify this, but assuming if you could, then that means it could potentially do way more than the vanilla modded. So that could mean that this could break the vanilla combat. What do you all think? Moving on to the M9 standalone. Again, unmodified pistol doing lots of damage, 35 in this case. Um, so the pipe rifle is going to be doing a lot less than this. So again, this could be a potential vanilla combat breaker. So the question is, yet again, is this going to break combat? On a side note, I would like to point out here's some more mislabeling from Fallout 4. Generally, when you say 38, most gun nuts are going to think that you mean 38 special, which is just really a bigger 9mm bullet that was built for revolvers. The 9mm Parabellum and the 9mm Luger were designed for semi-automatic pistols. They are a little bit smaller than a 38 special. So I'm not really understanding how you're able to magically modify a revolver round to work in a semi-auto pistol. Sorry, that was just bothering me how to say it. Moving on. Now, rifles have always been perhaps the best weapon in Fallout 4. So this is why I'm bringing this in. It probably is not a combat breaker because if you think about it, I think the highest rifle damage is like 105. So even if this was modded, I don't think it would go that high. So in that case, if that's true, then this would just be basically a new rifle skin, if you want to look at it that way. So what do you think? Rifle skin or combat breaker? Now let's talk about some armor. So this was in the new section of the mods, and this is called Scavenge NCR Armor. Now, it took me a little bit of reading to understand this, but it has on the armor 100 damage resistance, 65 energy resistance, and 20 reduced explosion damage. Now, unlike the last Fallout, there's not any explosion damage reduction. So, as far as that's concerned, I mean, I think that probably should have been added into the game, but it wasn't added in the vanilla, so it's kind of hard to determine that aspect. But let's keep looking at this. The gas mask is 15 damage reduction, 20 energy resistance, and 75 RE, which I'm going to guess is even more reduced explosion damage. The helmet's 20 damage resistance and 15 energy resistance. Now, the bigger problem with this particular mod is not so much that it's adding all this, it's the fact that it says all pieces could have lining upgrades and could also have ballistic weave. So, essentially it's saying that this armor could add 110 damage resistance and energy resistance from Ballistic Weave Mark V. On top of that, it's also saying that you'll get a lining upgrade. So essentially, one piece of armor has combined effectively the undergarment, Ballistic Weave, and a normal armor all in one. So I'm not sure if you can add undergarments below this, but if you can, then that sounds like a combat breaker to me. But I will wait to see what you say in the comments. So, moving on. Expanded Ballistic Weave. This mod basically just allows Ballistic Weave to be added to basically every piece of clothing in the game. I do agree that the Ballistic Weave stuff is very random, and I find it odd that it's not on some pieces of clothing. Now, this one is a hard question because essentially it's saying that Ballistic Weave can replace armor in its own way, just by the fact that now there's just a bunch of stuff out there that you can mod. At least that's what everybody thought at first. But then they realized that you could ballistic weave. I think it was the bowler's hat. So essentially, the bowler's hat replaced the combat helmet. So that's why this is kind of hard to determine. It's because it could potentially just improve vanilla and not really affect the gameplay, or it could. So what do y'all think? Do you think this is a vanilla improvement, or is it a combat breaker? Last thing we're going to talk about is the No Railroad Ballistic Weave. This particular mod makes it so that the ballistic weave blueprint comes in a holotape. This effectively makes it so you don't have to go to the railroad to get it. Now, let's talk about that. So I have received comments in which people are saying that you can get the ballistic weave through the normal vanilla means without aligning yourself to the railroad. I have Googled this to never end, and I do not see anything related to that. So if there's something that I'm not seeing, then please post an actual walkthrough of how to do it. Don't just post that you can do this without aligning the railroad. That one sentence is not going to help me. What's going to help me is knowing how to do it so that way I can replicate said process and actually run enough tests to see if it's a stable method. Now, assuming that that's not possible, this is basically saying that you're taking away the uniqueness of the railroad, right? Because each faction basically gives you a reward for doing their quests. So, in this particular case, the ballistic weave is one of many rewards that you get for doing the railroad. So, not only that, but then you have to factor in the survival mode. So this is where it might break it, at least the vanilla part. In survival mode, there's really only two ways to fast travel, from what I've heard through comments. They are aligning with the Institute, or aligning with the Brotherhood of Steel. Institute gives you the teleporter, and Brotherhood of Steel gives you the vertibird. So essentially it's saying we're going to make survival easy by allowing you to align with somebody else, and you get the ballistic weave on top of that. See where I'm going with this? What do you think? That's all I have. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to reading your responses to my questions.